Good morning, it's August 15th. This is To My Liberal Friends. There's an ongoing debate in some parts of the country. The issue is whether we're going to remain an economic system based in capitalism or we're going to move towards socialism. The mayor's race in New York City has brought this debate into focus for many in other parts of the country. Under capitalism, the market forces drive what will sell and what will not. Under a socialist policy, the government puts its thumb on the scale and favors one type of product over another, and in many cases incentivizes that product through various tax and subsidy schemes. I want to be right up front and say that I'm a supporter of capitalism. I've watched over my lifetime countries move towards socialism, and it's never been a good thing. Venezuela was once a booming and successful economy fueled by its oil reserves. Today, it's a mess. Cuba went to communism in the late 50s and now proclaims themselves to be a socialistic state. Not a very high standard of living there. Even in Europe, where they have dabbled in socialism, they are finding that the costs are unsustainable and the services they promise to provide are either ineffective or time-consuming to the users. A classic example of how this type of government intervention plays out can be seen in the push by liberals, extremely pushed during the Biden administration, to move everyone to electric vehicles. This was done in the name of environmentalism, and somehow we're going to get to what is known as net zero emissions place. And look at what is going on in two places gives you an idea how complicated and how misguided some of these government policies can be. One is in Great Britain, and the other here in the United States. Great Britain has a plan to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, but they're being met with strong opposition. The British people are paying some of the world's highest electricity prices, and the average citizen is wondering how long they can afford this policy. The Labour Party, the British version of our Democrats, have remained steadfast in their support for this policy, and in their party manifesto they claim Britain will be a clean energy superpower. But they've run into a new form of opposition. The rural landowners throughout the British Isles are telling the owners of proposed solar and wind projects to take their oceans of photovoltaic panels and huge number of giant wind turbines and put them where the sun doesn't shine and the wind don't blow. The proof is in the numbers. Since January 1st, there have been nearly 4 dozen rejections of solar wind projects in England, Ireland, and Scotland. Among the latest was a rejection last month in Kent, where a planning inspector spiked the plans for a massive solar project owned by the French company EDF. This is not a one-off. It's happening both in Britain and in the U.S. In the past 10 years, there have been at least 878 rejections or restrictions of wind and solar projects in the U.S. In Britain in 25 alone, there have been 45 rejections. Well, the second place where the government tries to put its thumb on the scale is here in the U.S., with the push for electric vehicles. For years, the government has offered a $7,500 tax credit for the purchase of either an EV or the installation of solar panels on homes. Now, 2 years ago, I built a new home here in the desert where the sun shines over 300 days per year. I looked at the cost of the solar panel and decided that even with a tax credit, it would take me 24 years to amortize the cost of any savings I've accumulated from a lower electric bill. And that does not factor in the panels start to age out, and many will have to be replaced around the 20-year mark. That tax credit comes to an end in the latest tax bill passed by Congress, and so EV makers are pushing hard for consumers to buy the vehicles while they can still take advantage of the $7,500 credit. But there was another part of the bill that consumers don't see, but those in the automotive industry are all too familiar with. With the rollback of some of the fuel economy standards, it's changed how what are known as selling of energy credits. Rivian and its rivals, Rivian's an electric truck maker, have generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue selling credits tied to the nation's fuel economy rules. But after the Trump administration removed penalties for violating those standards, the nation's top automotive regulators stopped issuing paperwork necessary to finalize those credits, leaving a lot of EV makers in the lurch. This is what happens when government policies try to influence the marketplace. Instead of allowing consumers to decide what products they want to buy, companies like General Motors, which has spent $3.5 billion in the past 3 years to buy credits, will no longer have to pay that, and that money will go into their own production innovation costs. Ford Motor Company spent about $4.3 billion on these credits. Now, I'm all for continued R&D in green energy, but it should be done in a way that allows the market to decide which program will succeed and which will fail. Get the government out of the game because they're not qualified to play. And that's the difference between capitalism and socialism. It's been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.